You're listening to A Radio.
But everything that we've achieved is under threat from the left-wing ideology that demands absolute conformity, relentless regulation, and a top-down control of the entire U.S. economy. Far-left politicians in our nation's capital want a massive government takeover of healthcare. They want to give government bureaucrats domination over every aspect of your business and your life. They want to eliminate American oil and natural gas. They want to enlist us in global projects designed to redistribute American wealth and kill American jobs all over our nation.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is The Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. This piece I'm just entitling, Listen to the Headlines on CTV News, November 13. Quite unbelievable. This is what I'm calling this piece. It's straight from their headlines. The Canadian mainstream media, November 13, 2019. I just happened to put this on and caught it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. If anyone can be in any doubt where their loyalties lie in Canada, this should put those thoughts to bed permanently. Tell me, no really, tell me, where in this commentary are you going to hear, because that's what it is, not reporting, is there any reference about anti-Trump administration rules created by the chairman of this farce hearing? Where do they mention that Republicans were denied some of their witnesses? Where do they say that the President of the United States, the one who's being accused of impeachable offences, yet to be defined by the way, has in fact been denied the right to counsel at this hearing? He has to rely on the good auspices of the Republican Party because he's not allowed any rebuttal. No mention of this at all in their commentary. And finally, what about the person who started all this off, the so-called whistleblower themselves? Why is it that Canadian media make no mention of the fact that the key to this investigation has been actually blocked from testifying in public? No, when Canadians want the news, want the truth, not the varnished one, the liberal one, I suggest they look elsewhere. They certainly won't find it in Canada. After you've listened to CTV News, this clip and others, I will put the links on my site. Not sure whether you can play them or not sure if you're able to play them outside of Canada, but give it a go.
Tonight, landmark hearings begin in the push to impeach Donald Trump.
Committee will come to order.
Damning new evidence.
It was much more alarming.
From two top diplomats.
It's a witch hunt, it's a hoax. I'm too busy to watch it.
Refills running out, confronting a drug shortage in Canada.
It looks like this isn't going to be resolved anytime soon.
Cancer patients forced to find a plan B.
It's become a steadily growing problem.
Plus, a Canadian billionaire in legal trouble over marijuana. The founder of Cirque du Soleil accused of drug trafficking in Tahiti.
CTV National News with Lisa Laflamme.
Good evening. This was a bad day for Donald Trump. A rare event now underway in Washington has the real potential to end his presidency. The first public impeachment hearings took place, allowing Americans and the world to judge the facts for themselves. Two career diplomats who've served under both parties were sworn in and delivered sharp testimony that included details about another telling Trump phone call. For his part, the president said he was too busy to watch any of the testimony. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Melvin on a political turning point there may be no turning back from.
Do not let Trump...
Outside Capitol Hill.
Treason! Bribery!
Inside, the public lined up to witness a milestone.
It's really living through a piece of history.
If we don't get to the truth, there will always be doubt.
Come to order.
Democrats brought on their star witnesses, career diplomats who served both Republican and Democratic presidents, top State Department official George Kent, and William Taylor, the acting ambassador to Ukraine, who dropped a bombshell.
The member of my staff could hear President Trump on the phone asking Ambassador Sondland about the investigations.
What he heard ties the president directly to demands for political investigations into his rivals while withholding millions in military aid.
Is this what Americans should now expect from their president? If this is not impeachable conduct, what is?
But that call seemed to slip the president's mind.
I know nothing about that. First time I've heard it. I don't recall. No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
Taylor testified he grew increasingly alarmed, knowing Ukrainians were dying in a battle with Russia, pressing Ambassador Sondland, a Trump megadonor.
Ambassador Sondland responded that President Trump cares more about the investigations of Biden, which Giuliani was pressing for.
The diplomats testified Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, led a back-channel campaign to get what Trump wanted.
Withholding security assistance in exchange for help with a domestic political campaign in the United States would be crazy. I believed that then, and I believe it now.
Republican lawmakers went on the attack.
Where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
Denouncing the hearing as a sham.
Ambassador, you weren't on the call, were you? You didn't listen on President Trump's call and President Zelensky's call?
I did not.
You've never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney?
I never did.
You never met the president?
That's correct.
This is what I can't believe, and you're their star witness.
Will any of this sway Americans? With hearings Friday and next week, Republicans are still standing by their president, and Democrats say they're still on the road to impeaching him. Lisa?
All right. Joy Melvin at the White House tonight.
Now I give you Fox and Friends, November 14, excerpts from their show. The same applies here. Not sure whether you'll be able to play this either, because they like to take things down as quickly as they're put up. But what they do give here is a somewhat different interpretation of Wednesday's events. And one clip is from someone intimately involved with that farce. All the links will be on my site, but I don't guarantee, as I say, that they'll work. Here are those clips from Fox and Friends. And oh, by the way, this should be a little insight to the Canadian media for our American friends. See, it's not all that different here, is it? Liberals walk on water here too.
Policies. Former Trump campaign policy advisor George Papadopoulos was named in the Mueller report and served time due to the investigation. He joins us right now to react from L.A. George, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So what did you think of the inquiry yesterday on Capitol Hill?
You know, initially, I thought it was a little comical. You know, people were probably thinking, the same shift, different day. But I think it was a little more pernicious than that. What I saw was basically an assault on our self-determinable constitutional republic by unelected bureaucrats who had an axe to grind against a president who either was not taking their advice or simply that they wanted to force the president's hand on Ukraine. I happen to believe that these bureaucrats had a Ukraine-first agenda in mind, not an America-first agenda in mind, because clearly when you've never met the president, you were not on the call that he was on, which apparently initiated this inquiry. I think it's quite disturbing to have these type of quote-unquote star witnesses in front of the American public.
Mm-hmm. Well, they both admitted they'd never talked to the president, never met the president. All their knowledge was second, third, fourth hand, things like that. But you're right. They did talk about how they felt about the president's foreign policy directives in Ukraine. but that's not really their job. The president gets to figure out what the policy is. George, you say that this impeachment inquiry is just a big distraction over what's coming down the pike.
Absolutely. I think the American people, because we have unfortunately been distracted by this inquiry and now these open hearings, and quite frankly, the way things are going, I'm not even sure they're going to get the 181 or 281 votes they need. I can't remember the exact number because I think there are around 31 Democrats who are in districts which Trump won in 16. So I don't know if Nancy Pelosi actually wants to take them down a rabbit hole and maybe see their political hopes evaporate. But that's a different issue. Okay. The point is that Durham and the Horowitz report, meaning the IG report, the imminent release, according to William Barr, is where I think all the attention of the country should be on. Okay. This has been
two of those they had never heard about, as far as I know.
And President
there was no reason for it.
President Zelensky never made an announcement. This is what I can't believe, and you're their star witness.
Congressman Jim Jordan hammering the top diplomat to Ukraine, Bill Taylor, yesterday, challenging the first witness on his testimony and understanding of the facts.
Congressman Jim Jordan, who was recently moved over to the Intel Committee for those impeachment hearings, joins us right now from Statuary Hall. Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Steve, Ainsley, Brian.
Good to have you. Congressman, you know what? I don't know that the Democrats are good TV producers, because it was a TV show where the stars of the show essentially didn't really know much firsthand knowledge about what happened.
No, neither witness. I mean, these are their first two star witnesses in this impeachment sham process they got going, and neither one had talked to the president, neither one had talked to Mayor Giuliani or Chief of Staff Mulvaney. And guess what? Their witness tomorrow, she's never met with the president. She's never talked with Mayor Giuliani. She's never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney. So this is how they start out. And I think, again, the American people can see the facts are on the president's side, and they can see that this process has been unfair from the get-go.
What did Bill Taylor's reaction indicate to you? I mean, he smiled when you said, and you're the key witness. It seemed to me, as a viewer, it seemed to me that he was acknowledging, yeah. Can you believe that?
Well, yeah, and he said he didn't even want to be the key witness. I said, well, that's not the Democrats' plan. They've made you the key witness, the star witness in the very first hearing. So remember, he did meet with President Zelensky 3 times between when the aid is released, or excuse me, when the aid is held and when it's released. Those 55 days. He met with President Zelensky 3 times, and never once did it come up this idea that the aid was linked to an investigation of Burisma, the company that hired Hunter Biden, or the Bidens themselves. Never once did it come up. And of course, the most important fact is, President Zelensky never made an announcement, never did a tweet, never held a press conference saying he was going to invest the Bidens to get the aid released. The aid was released because we ultimately became convinced President Zelensky is a risk worth taking and a true reformer.
When Castor, who sat next to you, got Kent to admit that he was concerned about Biden, Hunter Biden on that board, that he was not qualified to be on that board, that he personally wanted the corruption out of that country on his own behalf, doesn't care who the president is, and Biden being on that was a problem. Why was that important for Republicans to put forward? Number one, no one heard it, and number two, the president had every reason to be concerned about 2016.
Yeah, no, great point, Brian. And Steve did a wonderful job yesterday. You're exactly right. And Secretary Kent was so nervous about this perception of corruption when Biden's on the board of this company, not just because he's the vice president's son, but because Burisma had such a bad reputation. Remember, Secretary Kent even told USAID, don't do a joint project for school kids, some essay contest, I believe it was. Don't even do that because this company's reputation is so bad. And then what do? They go put Hunter Biden on the board. So I thought it was great work by Steve to make sure that fact was brought out yesterday.
You know, ultimately, the American public is going to decide whether or not the proceedings are fair. But when you look at, Adam Schiff came out with a list of 3 questions where, okay, Republicans, if you want to call any witnesses, they've got to meet these 3 things. Well, according to his own criterion, the whistleblower should be there. And Devin Nunes yesterday mentioned Alexandra Chalupa, who gathered all sorts of dirt for the Democrats and Hillary Clinton in 2016. They both fit his metric, and yet they are not being called.
Remember, Adam Schiff has changed on this. When this first started, he said we need to hear from the whistleblower. Then here now, the last several weeks, he said no, we don't need to hear from the whistleblower. The one thing that has changed in that time frame is we learned that Adam Schiff wasn't square with us when he said he hadn't talked with the whistleblower. The whistleblower had met with Schiff's staff. So the thing I keep coming back to is 435 members of Congress. Only one knows who the whistleblower is, and only one member of Congress has had their staff meet with the whistleblower, Adam Schiff.
He said he didn't know him.
No, he's now had three positions. First, he said the whistleblower testified. Then he said the whistleblower shouldn't testify. And now he's saying, I don't even know who the whistleblower is,
so
even though my staff met with him.
He's in that room. He's not under oath?
Right.
No, well, I mean, look, he's been all over the place on this whistleblower.
Okay.
We all want the whistleblower to hold up their right hand and testify so we can see what kind of motivation.
I've seen church prayer chains that are easier to understand than this.
In this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
Nobody shouted it out. We've got a great legal panel to figure out what was said yesterday and the impressions. Doug Burns, screen left right there, former federal prosecutor. Brett Tolman in the center square. He's a former U.S. attorney for Utah. And Robert Ray, former Whitewater independent counsel and a former federal prosecutor as well. Doug, let's start with you.
Sure.
You know, this was a TV show.
It sure was.
That the Democrats put on. And yet yesterday, on the premiere of this TV show, there was no Perry Mason moment.
No, there certainly wasn't. And in Perry Mason, you'll remember somebody would yell out, "Wait a minute, I did it, not him." You probably noticed that didn't happen, Steve.
No.
But joking aside, to me, the way I processed yesterday was 50% a foreign policy seminar about U.S. and Ukraine. And then it was 50%, as Ken Starr said, and I want to give him credit, it was an oversight hearing, not an impeachment hearing. So the point is, if somebody complained and said the president did something inappropriate in a phone call, do an oversight hearing, okay? This is completely overblown. My colleagues will explain it and lay it out better than me. To start throwing around terms like bribery and extortion and high crimes and misdemeanors is very, very reckless. It's a very weak case, and they've dug themselves into a very bad position, in my opinion.
Brett, did you think bribery or hearsay? There's nothing there.
Well, I look at this and I thought to myself, and I heard other former U.S. attorneys say, well, you know, there might be a bribery case here. I thought, I wouldn't present this case to a grand jury in a million years. And a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. Not in this instance. You don't have elements that are satisfied in order to bring a case. And you would not want to present that, especially if you're the one that's going to argue to a grand jury, hey, I'm bringing to you a very apparent bribery case. It wasn't there.
Robert, the bombshell people are pointing to is the call that Mr. Taylor came up with. Said one of my staffers, after I was interviewed, said, you know, I overheard a call between the EU ambassador and the President of the United States. Wasn't supposed to hear it, but he was able to hear it and put it together. So there's another example of this. That's the bombshell. Is it damaging to the president?
I think they were trying to use that as an example of direct knowledge, I guess, because the rest of the testimony, of course, suffered from the fact that as the warm-up act, none of the witnesses had ever actually even met the President of the United States. And as I said yesterday, this is supposed to be an impeachment inquiry related to the President of the United States. You're not impeaching.
But do you doubt the stories, Robert?
Well, I don't think there's any reason to think that it didn't happen. I mean, obviously the President was concerned about investigations, right? That was what was mentioned on the call. It wouldn't be surprising that the next day he would be overheard in a conversation asking about them, right? I don't think that gets you anywhere close to a quid pro quo. It's just what he was concerned about.
Of course.
And the president is entitled, as a matter of foreign policy, essentially, in a situation like that, absent a quid pro quo, to say, hey, listen, I'm concerned about these issues. These are investigations that I'm interested in. And wait to see, even if he withholds foreign assistance, wait to see what they do. And at the end of the day, the bottom line was the aid got released because the administration understood through OMB that they had no authority to hold up the aid beyond the end of the fiscal year.
Now, Doug, this all got started with the the report from the whistleblower to the Inspector General of the intel community.
Yes.
The whistleblower was nowhere to be seen yesterday, although the Republicans would like that person to testify. But Adam Schiff said yesterday he was accused by Devin Nunes as being the only member on that panel who knew the identity, and Adam Schiff said, "Oh, I don't know who it is."
Yeah, I almost fell out of my seat for a second watching that, because there's been a lot of
over and over again
reportage that he knows exactly who it is and so on. I mean, back to this other point, it's the president, and this is not a political point, it's legal. The president sets foreign policy. So if these two guys don't like his foreign policy, their only option is to resign, period. I stood up in courts and advanced positions under the U.S. sentencing guidelines that I didn't necessarily agree with myself. But that was my job. And if I felt that strongly about it, I would resign. It wasn't at that level.
But if you have to explain that hearsay is much better than direct or even circumstantial evidence, your case is weak. I don't want to stand in front of the American people, let alone a jury, and
Look
say,
what I overheard. So now we're left with, and it's the legal theory seems to be an attempted bribery involving an implicit quid pro quo with regard to efforts to obtain not foreign assistance, military assistance, but a meeting or a press conference with the announcement of an investigation.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio, EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern, and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.